Hello everyone, and welcome to another video from Wineberry Ridge Retreat. In my last video, I discussed a deer-proof fence that I had put up around my garden, some grapevines, and some fruit trees. In today's video, we're going to be going inside that enclosure and looking at some of the things that I've got planted in there. I refer to that enclosure as the garden spot. It has become one of my favorite places on the property. Among other things, I'll be introducing many of you to what I'll call for now the mystery melon. I've grown this for the first time in my garden this year and it's done really well. So when we come back, I'll be giving you some information on this little guy. In addition, I'll be demonstrating the proper thumping technique in order to determine if a watermelon is ripe on the vine. As I mentioned in the last video, when I bought the property, I knew that I was going to put up a fairly large fenced-in area specifically to grow a garden in. Also, I knew I wanted to plant a bunch of fruit trees inside and also several grapevines. Wanted to make sure that the fence was deer-proof so I wouldn't have to worry about any of what I planted to be eaten by deer. So I've got that accomplished. I found a fairly large flat spot as I was looking around for an appropriate site. I'll show you a before photo. As well as an after photo. So quite a bit of change in the area where I've put the garden spot for sure since I started working on it. So for the most part, my garden this year was somewhat of an afterthought. I kind of went into probably Tractor Supply and grabbed a few seed packets. I did want to plant some watermelons, but I don't typically eat a lot of vegetables out of the garden. And so I've kind of got a grab bag of things that I planted this year. I did plant 3 different varieties of watermelon. I planted Sugar Baby, Crimson Sweet, and I think the third one, and I've lost the packet of seeds, so I'm just going by the description of the watermelon itself. It's actually a Georgia rattlesnake, which is a kind of a long striped watermelon. As a note, there's not an issue in growing different varieties of watermelons close to each other. The main thing to remember is that watermelons cross-pollinate fairly readily. So if you do have different varieties growing together, it's probably best not to save the seed from any particular variety in order to plant it next year, because there's a good chance that the watermelon you collect seed from was cross-pollinated. So coming up, I'm going to demonstrate the proper thumping technique for watermelons when they're on the vine in order to determine if a melon is ripe or not. I'm going to say that I know this works pretty well when the watermelon is still on the vine. The main thing the thumping technique is trying to distinguish is whether a melon is green or ripe, not giving you the quality of the melon by any means. So here's the proper form. When you're thumping a melon, you want to use your middle finger. Your thumb is actually serving like a safety on a gun. Build a lot of torque with your middle finger and then just move your thumb away and release. So what you are doing when you thump a melon in order to determine its ripeness is you're listening for the sound that it makes when you actually strike the melon. Melons that aren't ripe yet will have a higher pitched thump, for lack of a better word, and melons that are ripe or even overripe will have a lower pitched thump. It's really hard to distinguish this if you don't have a comparison, so I'm going to have a few clips coming up where I'm thumping green and ripe watermelons back to back, so you hopefully will see what I'm talking about. So let's move on to a melon that you won't have to thump in order to determine if it is ripe or not. There will be no doubt when this little guy gets ripe, it just turns to this beautiful color with dark orange and yellowish stripes, and it's ready to be picked from the vine. The odd thing is this melon is not planted for its edibility. I think it is edible, but I've never tasted one before. It's actually planted for its perfumery or its fragrance. It's got a very unusual smell, very obvious smell. This little guy is like a time machine for me. When I smell this, I go back 50 years and I'm walking into my grandparents' house because they always grew these, and my grandmother would keep a couple in the window just to provide some fragrance throughout the house, kind of like we do an odorizer in today's world, or a plug-in, or any of those kinds of things. Somewhat like an overripe cantaloupe would be the best way to describe the fragrance. Certainly an organic base smell about it. This is actually called a plum granny or a Queen Anne's pocket melon. The latter name being, and if you're looking for them on the internet, that's probably what you are going to find it by. But a Queen Anne's pocket melon simply because I assume supposedly Victorian women would take these small melons and put them in their purse in order to deodorize, for lack of a better word, the objects in their purse that they may have had. So I've got some video clips coming up of some sunflowers that I had in the garden. I took these video clips probably a couple of months ago when the sunflowers were at their peak. They're pretty much all gone now, but just a couple of notes about sunflowers. First, they are heliotropic, meaning that basically they kind of move in the direction of the sun. And I'm pretty sure that's actually why they have that name, because they kind of follow the sun in the sky throughout the day. The second thing is that they are actually allelopathic. I think I pronounced that right, but I'll have that written down on the screen so you can take a look at it. That's where you actually need to be concerned if you're growing sunflowers in the garden with other plants, because any plant that's allelopathic basically means that it's producing chemicals that may impact or slow down another plant's growing. Black walnut trees are just infamous for this, probably one of the most well-known plants that has allelopathy. So I have two types of sunflowers in the garden this year. This variety is called Paradovic or Paradovic. I've seen it pronounced both ways. If you see those vast fields of sunflowers when you're driving along a road, and some of these just huge fields that are so stunning, this is generally the variety that is used. It's also used as a wildlife planting and food plots, especially for dove fields. So it's pretty common. It's my preferred variety. I did not plant these this year. They actually came up from a volunteer from last year. This whole field was in these sunflowers last year, and some of them came up. So the other variety of sunflowers I have in the garden is Mammoth. I intentionally planted these. I probably have 10 to 15 of those in the garden. I've tried them 2 to 3 times. I actually prefer the Paradovic over the Mammoth because Mammoth requires a little bit of care, just simply because of their size. They don't seem to put out as many flowers as some of the other varieties of sunflowers. Normally, I'm just seeing one at the top, or there may actually be several for them at the top, but they don't seem to have the number of flowers. The few times I have raised the Mammoth variety, I've ended up having to stake them to keep them from falling over, especially when they've got the seed head on, because it weighs quite a bit. But these have already blown down in a storm once this year, probably about 2 weeks ago, and they were possibly just about, I'm going to say about 3 foot tall, so they weren't even that tall at the time. So I staked them, but I have no doubt if I got a really high wind, they would probably pull the post out of the ground. But a pretty impressive bloom, actually, when they do bloom. So coming up are some short video clips and some photos of some of the things that I've got growing inside the garden spot. I certainly hope you've enjoyed this video. Thanks for watching. Take care, and we'll see you next time.